chopping the burger, one's doing something else, and on and on. And the home economists are running in at the last second while the steam is still going, or whatever it is. So I have no idea. Yeah, it's easy to, there's easy cases, right? Just a shooter at home with their kids. And, we see those types of things, or, director cameraman, they just take pretty pictures in available light. But when I think about what I call, a regular commercial, I don't know. And that's all I got.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce first Jeffrey. Jeffrey, are you there, and are you unmuted? Jeffrey.
There we go. Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay. Perfect. Jeffrey, can you introduce yourself? I know we didn't give you much to go on when we invited you to this, so I'm not going to ask you to do a whole big presentation, but we've asked a bunch of questions which have legal implications, like who's responsible. Have you guys? I know that you have some things on your site that talk about this, but have you been having conversations with your clients and your production companies that you guys work with? And if you could first introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, Jeffrey, we don't want to be criming, so just tell us how to not be criming.
There you go. Exactly. None of us want to be that or dead. So so I'm Jeff Greenbaum. I am an advertising lawyer. I have worked in the advertising industry now for, 25 years, something like that. Over the course of the time, I've spent lots of time representing literally every type of person working in the industry: advertisers, agencies, production companies, directors, reps, whoever, you name it, post-production companies. Look, I think that this is great, and you're asking the right questions, and there's a reason why we don't know. This is the reason why we're all scratching our heads about this, is because no one knows, right? And we're all trying to figure this stuff out. And, some of this right now is about doing what's reasonable, staying on top of the guidance that's out there, understanding that there are differences in different states depending on where you're working and where you're shooting, and then sort of trying not to go afoul of the laws that we do know exist, right? I mean, there are discrimination laws, and there are laws about reasonable accommodation, and there are things that are out there already that we do have answers to. So I think some of this is because I think some of our instinct is to do certain things because, hey, this sounds like it's better for people and that we can be more protective, but you do want to take a step back and go, does it fit into the sort of regular framework? A quick plug for people that are smarter than me. If you do look on Michael put up the thing to our website, but we're doing a 2-part webinar series. I think one of them is this Wednesday and one of them is the following week, which is about this, but in very, very great detail. So it's like about how to get back to work, basically. And it's about sort of procedures to follow, everything from medical procedures to employment procedures to documentation and stuff like that. And I would really encourage you to find it, and we could circulate a link to it or something like that. But it's basically being done by a mix of sort of employment lawyers, privacy lawyers, other kinds of people, and we're sort of getting to the stuff in great depth. But look, I guess what I'd say is a couple things. I think one, I think that going back to work requires a lot of pre-planning, right? Which is kind of obvious, which is what you do, but it's pre-planning. I think two, it is coming up with pretty detailed procedures and deciding, how is it that you're going to work, right? Because so much of what this is about right now is acting reasonably, right? And looking like what you're doing is making smart choices that keep people's health in mind, that are protecting people in a reasonable way. And so some of that is about really just taking the time to, sort of build these procedures up front. And a lot of what we're starting to work with production companies on is that kind of thing. Like, what are our procedures? Literally making a decision up front, writing them down. These are our procedures. These are our expectations of people, and sort of preparing a set of paperwork and documentation that we're giving to everybody who's going to be working on a production ahead of time that says, look, this is the way we're going to work. This is what our expectations are. This is this is, you know, making them sign off on agreeing to certain procedures up front. So there's a lot of that going on. And I think that some of that is going to be really important, both in terms of setting expectations up front, but also in terms of, you know, by literally forcing yourself to go, okay, how are people going to arrive? What time are they going to arrive? How are they going to get there? Are we asking them to arrive in a way that we feel comfortable asking them to arrive? Are they all going to arrive at the same time? You know, so just starting to literally go through the you know, a production planning like you would, but think about it from sort of from a COVID lens. And then I think the second piece of this is thinking about the health piece of it, which is complicated, right? Which is, you know, what kind of health screening do you want to do? What kind of health screening can you do? What kind of questions can you ask and not ask? And I think it is really important that people understand upfront the kinds of stuff you're allowed to ask and not ask. And also, you know, what are the kinds of things, what kind of procedures are you going to follow, you know, in connection to production? I mean, people are going to make very, very different choices. And so I think a lot of this is about right now, sort of thinking through and making those decisions up front. So
I have one question for you that all the planning and all that is great, but I've been asked very specifically, what is my liability? And this is the heart of the legal question. If somebody claims that they came to work for me and then they ended up sick, do I, you know, if they get a cold now, I have no liability. If they catch the flu, I have no liability, but this is different. And what happened?
So I think the answer is I think there's a couple different answers to that question right now, which is, number one, no one's ever going to be able to show where they caught it, right? Like, just as a practical matter, right? It's not like you got hit in the head with a light. I mean, no one's going to know. If they get sick 5 days later, they're not going to know. That's number one. The second is there are legal changes that are happening. And so I think that's going to be a little bit of a moving target as well. I know there's been some discussion, I don't remember whether it's been passed or not in New York, about making COVID-related illness a workers' comp issue. So I think that there's sort of a legal environment changing. I mean, look, what I would say is that, you know, you're responsible for stuff you do wrong, right? You know, if you're negligent, if you don't behave properly, if you don't set stuff up properly, you know, you're responsible for that. You know, if someone, you know, is working on a production and the production doesn't feel like it's following proper procedures, and people seem like they're being exposed in inappropriate ways, and then they get sick a couple of days later, you may very well get a claim. So some of this, regardless of whether they could prove it or not, right? So I think some of this is about, number one, you know, making some decisions about a release you're going to have people sign up front. Now, you can't make people waive all claims. I mean, certain things you're just responsible for, and under the law, you can't make people waive those claims. But I think there's other things you can make them waive. And I think that coming to work during a pandemic, understanding that there are certain risks that we cannot protect them against, that no one can control, you know, that's something that production companies now are asking people to sign off on and saying, look, you're willing to take that risk. So I think that there is definitely some advanced paperwork you have to do. Now, I'm interested in the union perspective, because I think that's an important one too, in terms of what you can ask union members, what kinds of claims you can ask them to waive. That's something we've been thinking about as well. But I think as a general matter, I think that one way or another, you're going to want to go into these kinds of productions with something where people are acknowledging up front, you know, what's going on here. And at the second, by the same token, making sure that what you're doing does pass muster as sort of reasonable procedures. Because I think that's where you open yourself up.
Well, that's good. Okay, well, we're going to come back to you, but you passed it on well to the guys from 600. So I'm going to see if they are unmuted. And I don't know which one of you wants to do the most talking, but why don't you start by Dave? Why don't you start introducing yourself? You can tell us how you pronounce your name as well.
Sure. My name is Dave Chameides. I'm a camera operator in Local 600, and with Chris Taylor, I am one of the co-chairs of the safety committee. I do have to make the point that we are not here representing 600, but we are here with people who have knowledge of what's been going on. So I just need to make sure that everybody's aware of that.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah. Oop.
Sorry about that, guys.
Chris, do you want me to sort of launch in, or you want to say something?
I'll do a little kickoff for you, I guess. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing that I think it was left out that we're co-chairs of the safety committee, and we can share with you guys kind of the things that we've been working on and doing. But there's still a lot of unknowns. I can say that, that ultimately a safe working environment is the responsibility of the employer. However, the set is and always has been a dangerous place. So, but we have safety meetings, and we have medics, and we have fire lanes, and we have signs, and we have training. So there are known risks. And from the safety committee standpoint, we're approaching this as a new hazard, right? And a new risk, and how do we deal with that? So I think that's the main thing I wanted to launch off with, Dave. If you want to.
Yeah, I could pick it up. So, we've been meeting with our executive director, Rebecca Ryan and John Lindley. Rebecca then goes to the industry-wide safety committee. I don't know what they call it. It's got some long name, but it's basically everybody comes together.
Industry-wide Labor Management Safety Committee. I have it written down.
Nice.
And they basically are trying to sort of hammer out how do we do this. And there are a lot of facets to this. You've hit on a bunch of them: waivers, insurance. The way that I look at it, just to put it into perspective, is this: the way that we're going to get back to work safely. I mean, we're going to get back to work in an unsafe manner. It's actually already happening. And I say that in that they're already. I know friends who have rental houses, and they're renting out packages. They're small, and most of them are the guys at home, whatever. But they're getting larger. And this is my personal belief. I think what's going to happen is small productions in right to work states are going to be the first ones to come back on any larger level, meaning, actual crews with, fully or minorly staffed crews or whatever. And the truth of the matter is they're going to be the guinea pigs. And they're unfortunately going to be people who are going to suffer because of that. And the studios are going to watch that, and they're going to learn from that, and they're going to do the best they can. Our big concern, from a studio level and from larger productions, is that if we go back to work too fast, and I think too fast is unfortunately going to happen, and also to put a concept on it is probably really before there's a vaccine and before we can control this. Some crew and some cast and some large actor are going to go down, and then the entire industry is going to shut down for a lot longer than we've already been shut down. That's the big concern, and that's the problem with going out too fast. Of course, everybody's chomping at the bit, and it's totally understandable why people are going to take jobs that come to them, because people have to feed their families. From a union perspective, people need, health insurance. I mean, there's so many reasons. So we're trying to put together best practices and protocols, knowing that these will not create safe sets, but knowing that these sets are going to, or these shoots are going to happen. And we can't stop people from doing these shoots, and we can't stop people from taking these jobs. So we're trying to come up with the best practices. Realistically, the way we're eventually, like in widespread, going to get back to work is, let me see if I can get this. The top tier is going to be what the government says is allowed. If the government says more than 20 people can't congregate, that's going to dictate whatever that is. I'm not saying that'll be, but we're going to have to be legal, obviously. The level below that is going to be the lawyers and insurance companies, which are going to say, we will tolerate X and Y, but we will not tolerate Z. I don't think, personally speaking, that either of those two tiers are really going to protect us as workers, because they're going to be the bare minimums. The thing that's going to help us back, so you've got these two, is then down here, you're going to have what the actors are willing to tolerate. And that's going to push the safety back up, because they're not going to be willing to be on set with certain things. I also think for a while, just conceptually, and this is just a stab in the dark, but it's probably right, you're probably not going to see big A-list actors going on these first jobs. You're probably going to see lower tier actors who are going, I want to take a shot, and I'm going to take an opportunity, because they need it and they want the opportunity, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a gut feeling. As far as what exists right now and moving forward, and it's not popular, but there's, in my mind, only one way that we can do this safely, and that's full quarantine of cast and crew. The only way that you can guarantee, and it's not even a guarantee, but you can relatively guarantee a cast and crew do not get exposed to this virus is to take them out of society. So you basically quarantine everybody for 2 weeks. Everybody stays quarantined through the shoot, and then everybody goes home. Now they're doing this in China successfully. They're doing this in a couple of other countries. They're talking about doing this here. I personally don't think that workers and actors are going to be willing to put up with this. So then what's the next option, which doesn't exist yet? The next option is probably a scenario, and this is probably the most likely to keep us as safe as possible, where you show up for work at the parking, crew parking, you text a number, and a nurse or a medical personnel or something or other comes out and gives you a relatively instantaneous, relatively high accuracy test. And if you are cleared, you go to set. Everybody who's on set, then it's known that everybody is clear. These tests aren't 100% accurate. Right now, they're about 70%. Hopefully, they're going to go up from there. With multiple testing, that percentage goes down and down and down. So the idea would be to test everybody when they get there and everybody at lunch. And I've had people go, "There's no way that's going to happen." It's like, I think we have to mentally get out of that mentality, because all of this 6 months ago, people would have said, "There's no way this is going to happen." Right. We're in a very new reality. So the best way, as far as I'm concerned, and it doesn't exist yet, is to have constant testing and constant tracing. If you are found to be sick, your name goes on a list, and you are not allowed to be hired until you are cleared by a doctor and taken off of that list. And that's not punitive. That's just the greater good. And also, by the way, making sure that you're safe as well. Having done volunteer work recently for testing sites and worked in full PPE for an hour at a time, I can tell you that doing something where I was literally just standing and telling car after car the exact same thing for an hour is absolutely exhausting. You're screaming the whole time to be heard. People, by the end of the day, are no longer social distancing because people are social animals. People are taking their masks down because it's impossible to breathe. As long as this virus is not under control and or we can't test who has it, any set that goes back is not going to be a safe set. And it's going to happen, and I may very well end up being in one of those. But we're all going to be in peril, and there's just no way around that. We in the 600, we've come up with protocols of cleaning equipment and showing up early and cleaning equipment and how to hand off equipment and how, all sorts of things. How many people are going to be out there using remote heads, this and that and the other. There is still absolutely no way that we're going to socially distance. And if we're in enclosed environments and we have air conditioning, is even a question as to what that does. So these are all things that are ongoing and really, in all fairness, way too early to figure out correctly. But I think the march is going forward. The one other thing I'll throw in there is simply that I had some idea and I can't think of what it was. So anyway, that's a bunch to chew on. I'm sure that's more.
No, that was fantastic.
Thank you. Dark. I'm just trying to be realistic about this. It's just, I don't think we can tell people they're safe if everybody knows that they're not safe.
Right. I think the two things that we've said here that I think is entirely correct, which you've said, is there's no way to really do this 100%. And the second part is there's really no way you tell people who need jobs to stay home after when they're being offered work. If the government says we can't work, that's one thing. But if they say we can and people start working, they're going to be offered jobs and people will take them. So
actually, can I just pop in the thing, and then Chris, I'll turn it over to you for a second. The one thing that I have told everybody is going to have to recognize, we have this thing in the film industry on all levels. We got to get the shot. We got to go here. That's over. It has to be over. It can't continue. And the simple reason is when an actor comes on set with a loaded gun, nobody tells that actor to hurry up. Why? Because they have a loaded gun. And we have to basically have a new mentality that we recognize that everybody is walking with a loaded gun all the time. And we're going to have to get to the point where we're going to go, we're not going to get that sunset shot. Why? Because we can't have those two people go in and do that thing right where they're doing it, because that's against protocol. And that's the case. One of the things that we're fighting for, Local 600 and elsewhere, is to have a dedicated safety officer on set who is not paid by the studios, whose job it is to make sure that we are working safely. And they have this in Australia. It works like gangbusters. And that person can literally shut the show down. So if we have that, everything else sort of falls in line behind it. But it's one of those things that everybody's going to have to realize. We can't, and we're going to have to join together and defend each other. We can't succumb to people saying, I don't care, we just have to get the shot.
Well said. Dave, do you want to follow up on that? Not Dave, sorry.
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah. So yeah, to piggyback on that, I was thinking a couple of days ago about how if we do treat it more like everything's a stunt, you know, where we walk instead of run, and we plan and we take precautions, and we the people that don't need to be in the immediate vicinity aren't, then what happens? Well, nobody panics. We get everything done safely and with fewer takes because we're approaching it that way. And I think that might be one of the approaches. Now, when it comes to the idea of quarantining, you're getting into, you're opening up, I think, a can of worms, because people like me be like, hey, if there's no such thing as your time or my time anymore, I want to be on the clock 24/7. And then it's the honor system is the main problem, because the first, is a joke, but to say the first grip that orders a pizza breaks the seal. I mean, I'd probably be the person to order it, but the honor system just doesn't work. And for me, I keep going back to the same end, which is taking what we know about the virus and what we don't know about the virus, which is huge, and say that if I was tested every morning at call time, that and we all get the green light, that we could work with a relative assumption of safety, a baseline of it, and that requires, you know, testing to be instant and available and, you know, plentiful and affordable. So and because I'm the kind of guy who's like, there may never be a vaccine for this, and even if there is, we can't wait for it. The industry will not be able to survive, you know, that amount of time. So I guess those are my main thoughts on that.
Good. Well, I think it's there might be some questions, but I'm looking at the chat, and you know, people are talking about budgets, and we as a community are the wrong people to answer that question, because we're the ones supplying the talent. We're not the ones buying it. We're mostly commercial people here, so you know, it's going to be the brands and the agencies and the people who are buying our services are going to have to figure that out. I personally, having been around for a while, can't believe that people they're going to spend any more money, especially in a time where the economy is sort of in a hold. I think that budgets aren't going to go up, so we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with this without additional budgets. Jacqueline has her hand up, I noticed, so I'm going to start opening these up to questions. And you guys, this means, by the way, I'm going to unmute everybody. I don't know if this is going to work because there's almost 80 of us now. So I'm going to unmute everybody, but I'm going to try to call a person. And then if somebody has an answer, let's try this, see what happens. Okay, Jacqueline, let me get to unmute. Hold on. How do I do that? Aha. Unmute everybody. Here we go.
Okay. So first I want to thank you all, because this is actually great. It's a really solid, productive conversation. Sorry, I'm reading my little notes here just to make sure I cover everything. I agree with the idea of looking at other countries and seeing how they're effectively doing things and what lessons we can apply. And I love the idea that maybe we look at some of the procedures and how we're doing them, and maybe not take the approach that that's the way we've always done it, so therefore that's the way we do it going forward. That we keep everyone safe. You know, we get the shots, we get the things that we need to get, but we do it in a way that's safe. My question is, one of the things I saw was an article, it actually started by a doctor in the New York Times. I'm not seeing a whole lot of conversation about oximeters in terms of as another way to address or track or those who are asymptomatic. I saw an article in the New York Times, and then I saw that doctor do a series of interviews, And what I'm seeing is that, or what I've heard or read, is that for those who are asymptomatic, their oxygen levels go down, affects them before they produce any symptoms.
I think I'm going to jump in real quickly because I've talked to some doctors about this, and they say that those are pretty inaccurate. They work, but they're pretty inaccurate. The ones that you can buy at home, the ones at the hospital are much better. So again, it's like, what about testing? If it's not accurate, you know, it's not the worst thing to have. But Perry also had a comment. I think he has one of them.
I just got mine. I had never even heard of it or knew it by name, and I read that piece, and it's like, oh wow, I'm getting one, and I finally got it.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's useful to have, but it's and maybe part of the mix, but definitely not a silver bullet.
I didn't think of it as a silver bullet, but the question is with all of the testing, it still won't, as we know, address those who are asymptomatic. However we do this,
I think that there's a couple. I think there's a couple pieces here. I think one, you know, certainly it's going to be okay to ask people if they have it, right? They've been diagnosed. Like there's a baseline of thing that you can ask. Like it is perfectly okay to say to somebody, you cannot come to the shoot if you have it or if you're exhibiting certain symptoms, right? And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to identify what are those symptoms or the combination of symptoms that people sort of generally accept as being, you know, good evidence that someone has it. What you have to be careful about, though, and this is why you're going to want to do this with the right medical advice, whatever.
Sure.
Is you're going to want to make sure that you're not discriminating against people based on other
Absolutely.
They get less oxygen in their lungs than other people do. So you're going to have to make sure that you're for example, the temperature check for whatever reason, you know, if you have a fever, you know, it's an indication that you've got something wrong with you, right? Your kids aren't allowed to go to school when they have a fever. You know, if you're going to do fever checks, that is one way to do it. But before you start adding on additional symptoms in sort of a non-professional way, you know, you're going to have to make sure very clear that what you're doing gets directly at someone making a decision that people are going to understand, you know, goes directly to whether you have it or not.
Yeah, I absolutely. Absolutely. To me, it just seems like possibly, you're quite correct. I just think that the whole goal is to keep everyone on the safe on the set as safe as possible. And so where that can be added appropriately, legally, etc., with the right medics, etc., I think it's just another precaution, and it's cheap.
If I could just throw in here, having been on a lot of these conference calls about it because of our Chris and I being involved with 600, the general thing that we've sort of talked to people about is there really, unless there's a doctor present, there shouldn't really be any discussion about vaccines or medical privacy or how we're going to determine, you know, this or that, the other is really kind of wasted time, because the thing is, all those decisions should be made with a medical advisor in the loop. And that's why 600, you know, when we're coming up with our protocols, we come up with what we think works based on what we do, because we know that the best. And then we're running that by an infectious disease expert. So at the end of the day, all these sets have to have a set medic, and that set medic is going to have HIPAA laws, you know, they're going to understand them. And they're hopefully, if they're good, they're going to understand the medical aspects of this. So we try to stay away from those, just because it's all, unless there's a medical, you know, expert involved in the conversation, it's all sort of just hearsay anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea. Any other questions?
I'll throw something in there, by the way, that I forgot to. Just one thing is, you know, people are talking about staffing and cutting down on crew and this and that and the other. And I can understand why that's being discussed, because we want to limit, you know, if you got social distancing, you've got spatial relations, more people, it's harder to do, et cetera, et cetera. But ironically, this may actually take more people to do correctly, because for instance, in the camera department, there aren't people sitting around, and you've got to have someone who's constantly cleaning equipment. You may have to have someone who comes in early to clean equipment. I mean, there's so many different things.
I see, Dave, I see on the chat, somebody's working on a bid right now, in fact.
Yep.
He said that he put in $8,000 for COVID. I don't know if it's for cleaning. It's a certified disinfection company will disinfect all gear and working spaces, the dry mist, as well as UV light. And the client is not fighting them on that. That's great.
That's good to hear. The one thing that I'll say about that, though, is do you want that company that doesn't know anything about the film industry coming in and disinfecting camera gear? So there are situations, I mean, I wouldn't want to, maybe they want to, someone else. But then when the director of photography says, why is there a scratch on the lens? I mean, there are things that we have to consider that, are not going to happen. But that's fantastic to hear. And I think one of the things that's happening right now, we've been fighting like long hours for a long time and driving home tired. That doesn't affect every single person, every single day, every single minute. This affects across the board everyone. So I think more people are on the same boat with this, but that's great to hear.
Can I ask the person who did that? I think that's Paul, right? Paul? Are you there?
I'm here.
Can you explain a little bit about what you're thinking and what you've actually learned from doing that?
Well, I haven't learned anything from doing it because we haven't done it yet. So, but the company, and this shoot is happening out of state. I'm based in LA, and the company that I found is a company that their day-to-day gig is doing hospitals and hospital electronics. So that made me feel pretty good about unleashing them around camera gear. Listen, it's the wild, wild west right now. And, as has been said over and over thus far this morning, we're going to learn what we learn. It's our feeling that we need to really not only step up, but overstep in what we think we'll need to make everybody safe on the set.
Right.
And this was one of the first things that occurred to us, was to look for a company like this. Because as has also been discussed ad nauseum on WheresSpot and Reopening Hollywood, this isn't something that we give to a PA to do.
Right.
Even if we weren't using dry mist and we were just using, Lysol spray, were anybody to be able to buy a can of Lysol spray, I still wouldn't give it to a PA to do. I would only really want to give it to a professional who knew how to disinfect things. No, Lysol is around. Especially since there are going to be people working within the environment with which these chemicals are being used, right? So, I wouldn't, for instance, want a PA, if it was a car shoot, I wouldn't want a PA to go into the picture car and spray Lysol 2 seconds before we were supposed to do a take.
Right.
So I just need somebody on set thinking about all that stuff to make sure that we're protected not only from the virus, but from the stuff we're using to protect ourselves from the virus.
Paul, can I ask you a question about
Sure.
it? I think it's great. And I'm just curious of what you're getting for your money. And that question has to do with, is this something they do every day that you're shooting? Do they do it once and they leave? Because, who knows how long it takes.
It's a good question. No, they'll be with us. The bid that I got from them is for every shoot day and disinfecting on an ongoing basis whenever they and our on-set medic or health professional really determine enough people have been in and out of a space that we should give it a spray. And what I'm told by the guys that I'm talking to is that it's about a 10 to 15 minute time lag between when the spray is used and when it's safe for people to enter the space. So, you know, and that speaks to what a lot of other people are saying too, is the need to slow down the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not only for this, but you got to give people time to have their masks off in private spaces, because it's unreasonable to think that somebody's going to wear a mask for 10 or 12 hours without a break. So that's all stuff that we're building into the bid that we're submitting to the client.
Okay, I'm going to move on to another question. Is your name Cujo?
Yeah, Cujo, C-U-J-O, Cujo, like the rabbit dog in the movie.
Okay.
So I'm a production sound mixer in Atlanta.
That's why your sound is so fantastic on this.
Yeah.
I think you've got the best sound so far. You win.
My question is for Jeff Greenbaum and the crowd as a whole. And one of the things that we keep seeing a lot and reading a lot about is waivers of liability for COVID. And my question is this: if we cannot really guarantee where somebody got COVID or how they got COVID or any of those things, then what good is a liability waiver? I mean, really, we're signing a waiver for something that can't be really protected against in the first place. So my train of thought says that the waiver is essentially useless at that point, and forcing people to sign it, some that will agree with it, some that won't, avoiding that whole conflict entirely might be a better thing. I mean, we don't sign waivers for the flu or for anything else that might kill us. And as Dave and Chris have both eloquently stated, the film set is an inherently dangerous place already. And if the employer or the production company of record is doing all of the things that are proposed as keeping the set as safe as possible, that is disinfecting station, hand washing station, box lunches if that's what it comes to, staggering crew calls, limiting the number of people that are in a set, you know, like first camera goes in and does their thing, and then the grips and lighting go in and do their thing, and then actors go in and do their blocking, and, you know, we go in groups and come back out in groups, then it seems to me that a waiver of COVID liability seems to be just mostly ceremonial at that point and largely useless. And Jeff, you're a lawyer, you can answer this a lot better than I can, but that's kind of where my thought process is on it. And then the other non-related thing is I've been working with several sound mixers to come up with safe COVID set guidelines for the sound department, and we envision hot zones, cold zones, warm zones, you know, kind of a zone defense kind of a thing, and setting up distance video villages, you know, segregated video villages, multiple video villages, and even producing and directing via the cloud. So that's my comment for now, and then I'll go back to mute.
I know I'm totally going to write a blog post now called Practicing Safer Sets. And
I have a YouTube video on that for the sound department, by the way.
It's good. I would say a couple things. I would say I think one of the things that people have identified, which rings really true to me, and which is, I guess, kind of obvious, which is you can only accomplish so much on your own, right? You can only, you know, you can only solve so much at the shoot, right, on the set, you know, within sort of the typical constraints of production. And I think that the point that a lot of people have raised, which is way more important than whatever you have people sign, is this conversation with the agency and the client, you know, at the bid stage, which is there enough budget to do what we're going to do? Are there enough shoot days to do what we're going to do? Have we, you know, are you going to give us the ability to deal with some of these issues? I mean, some of the issues that I'm talking about with agencies and developing creative at this moment is, you know, those shots make sense. If you're trying to do that production right now, are you going to feel comfortable doing that scene? And have you thought about other ways to do that scene? Right. So I think some of this is about, you know, no one wants to, you know, no agency creative director wants to hear that. But, you know, I think some of this is about actually saying, look, you know, this is a partnership among a bunch of different people here, but some of this may go back to the creative and may go back to the budget, because the more, you know, you adjust those things, you know, the more ability you have to deal with what's that. I think that's number one. I think the second thing is I think that I think it is not just about a waiver of liability. I think it is about creating a set of expectations with each person coming into this that create a uniform set of expectations. I mean, look, we all have been to the park or the supermarket or wherever and seen a group of people that do not have uniform expectations about how you behave and how you're supposed to interact at this moment. And I think this is about saying, look, on this shoot with this group of people for these days, these are going to be our uniform set of expectations. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to look out for. This is what you have to agree to. This is sort of, and it's not only about protecting ourselves in case something goes wrong. This is about prevention, right? This is about just doing what's right. So to me, what's much important to me is saying, what can we prevent up front through real conversations, agents and client? And then number two, doing the planning, coming up with a set of expectations that each person's going to be expected to follow. Look, the waiver language, look, why do you have people sign waiver language? You have people sign waiver language so that when they get, you know, when they come to you and they say, you know what, I've been quarantined for 8 weeks. The only time I've left the house is to go to your shoot, and 4 days later I came home sick. It must be you. Look, I agree. I think it's a long shot. How are they going to demonstrate that they got it from your shoot as opposed to something else? But, you know, look, I also think, you know, I think many people would say there's a lot of fairness to saying, hey, look, we are all making these choices together. We're all entering into a very unsafe and uncertain environment. You know, we're going to lay out for you up front what we're doing to try to make this as safe as we possibly can, given the parameters of what we're working with. But you also have to agree that you understand that there's only so much we can do. So the answer is I think that if it were me and it were my company, you know, I'd be having people sign a waiver. But that's only a very, very small piece of the puzzle for me and not the most important one.
I think we should move on if somebody else has any. We have about 5 just expectations. I try to keep these at an hour because we're all busy. Well, maybe not, but we all should be. So we'll keep it to 5 to 10 more minutes at the most. Does anybody else have any other question? Oh, one question I saw on the chat were about restrooms. Big issue. Yeah. That's where they're saying a lot of this stuff's happening. You flush the toilet and the stuff goes all over the place. And the toilets on a shoot are not the best place to be anyway. So has anybody dealt with that and thought about that?
No.
That's a no. Okay, that's something to think about. Any other questions?
Jennifer, you had a question about casting? Where are you?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I wrote in the chat, but I'll just read it out loud in case, you know, someone can't access it. So to the producers on this call, you know, self-tapes have been very popular in the film world. I do film and commercials, but in terms of commercials, I imagine we'll be heading, especially for the first round, we'd be doing self-tapes for on-camera talent. But in terms of this, for callbacks, are you guys thinking that would be done as well, like in that fashion, or like a Zoom callback session? Because Zoom has like this waiting room feature, if you will. So, or if you guys still want to do it in person, even though it's a limited number of people, but still, that's my first question. If you want to, we can go through that first.
Hi, this is Angela. I'm an agency producer, and that to me seems like one of the no-brainer things that we can adjust to. I'm more worried about casting remotely, and there's going to be some adjustments from, of course, doing the first round Zoom or even pictures and then callbacks with Zoom. Again, that seems like a logical adjustment to make. It's more the casting and not the casting, the actual shooting and having all those people on set that,
Right.
you know, I think is the bigger issue.
Yeah, I agree. I think casting via Zoom is a great way to do it, and I think that is a no-brainer as well.
Great. And my second question is for Jeff. Would production be providing casting a waiver? Because if we have an in-person session, I'm just saying for that specific case, would they be supplying the casting office with a waiver for the talent to sign because they're coming in for that project?
I think they probably would. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people are going to do. Though I also think, you know, my reaction was the same as Angela's, which was, I think there's going to be a big push to do a lot remotely, stuff that we would have
Sure.
never could possibly have done remotely before.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I think the other, oh, sorry, that's
Namakula. Namakula.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi. So I was just going to comment on, because we're still in the middle of this and nobody really knows what's going on, and it sounds to me like this is going to cost a lot of money, and already clients were not wanting to spend money. It feels like what's going to end up happening most likely is the creative is going to have to change. The other day I had an audition for a commercial and I had to shoot it at home, and in the slate I had to say what kind of phone I had, because if I booked it, I'd be shooting it myself on my phone. That's my scene for the spot. So the spot was going to be something like about communications and people communicating via video chat and Zoom and stuff like that. So I'm just thinking larger projects. If you have a TV show or if you have a series or a film, if the lead actor, for example, is sick, what do you do? Do you have a stand-in and then later on put his space back on? And I mean, it's these things that I don't know how we would resolve them. I mean, if you're going to be testing people, but then the tests aren't exactly going to be accurate, but they have a high temperature, does that mean that they have it and they can't go to set? I mean, there's all these unknowns that we're trying to answer now. And I think I guess we just have to see what happens and what other people do when they open up. It's really just kind of a weird place to be right now, trying to second guess when we don't even know if this virus, when you get it, can you get it again? You know, are you immune? I mean, nobody knows anything.
I think there are too many questions that nobody knows about what the virus is, how it works. Just a sort of side personal note, one of our kids was sick, ended up in the hospital in LA. Everybody thought she had COVID. Turns out it was not COVID. And it was something else, but you know, nobody knows. It all looks the same, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of things look the same, and it's a scary question, because you know, if you sneeze, are you all of a sudden you're out of a job? So it's a good question.
Shuttle driver and tours.
So in that same vein, I think one of the people, I don't know if we have anybody who's in makeup here, but I've been got asked a lot of questions about the makeup department. It's like, you know, whole complete kits for each individual talent, which is going to increase the cost quite a lot for that. So I think I think, you know, Jeff said it. I think the creative and the agencies are going to really have to start thinking about, you know, you're not going to be able to ask the client for, instead of, you know, $1 million for this commercial, you want 2. It's not going to happen. So they're going to start having to talk about how do we adjust creatively to make these things happen, which may mean less work, for the actors on here, because, you know, instead of having 10 actors, you might have 3.
Well, also what we're talking about a lot is other means of production, but there's some categories that you can't do animation because you're trying to show a product, you know, but they're trying to push, I know at least in my agency, we're trying to push creatives to other ways to execute the idea, but there's some that you just have to do live action, which, you know, I don't want to hear because that's my favorite way to produce.
Exactly. Good for us in the post-production world.
Yeah, I guess.
I was going to say we hadn't heard much from post. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I talked to somebody who was on a show, and they had said that, I couldn't believe this, but there was communication through the through the Zoom world that they all live in, that they were going to start shooting scenes where people were shot separately and put them together in post. Yeah, I can't believe it, but
yeah, I live in that largely in that post world, so I'm just smiling because a lot of conversation goes on about production, which absolutely is necessary, and but there is a whole post world we have to deal with and bring into this mix.
Great. We have time for one more question, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. Anybody? Perry, is there anything in there that you saw that was
I'm not seeing anything. Anybody raising their hand? I don't even know if that function is
Dave's
working.
back. Dave's back since.
Leandro,
I'll throw something in there just because it seems like there's a lot of commercial people in the room.
Yes.
You know, I think that we're going to have to rethink who necessary crew are. And that doesn't mean that anybody's less important or more important.
Right.
But when I'm on a commercial in the past, and there are 20 people sitting, clients and producers and whatever, most of whom are not necessarily adding anything or are mainly doing things that are vocal, those people should not be on that stage. The only people on that stage are the people who physically have to be there. And that should be really, really considered, because that's how we're all going to stay safe. Now, the good news is I doubt any of those people are going to want to be there. but I think it's just something worth saying to the client, and just saying, look, we're going to have a really nice room. It's going to have video. And one of the things that, you know, Chris and I have talked with other people about that we're definitely going to be getting to is, like, for instance, marking rehearsals in a small stage or room or whatever. There will be a camera up there, and every person who's non-essential will be able to watch the marking rehearsal from a video monitor or video monitors, so they don't have to be in that room. People who need the exact spatial relations will have to be in that room. We'll figure that out. But that's going to become the new norm. And so that can obviously, that information can be transported to an office, you know, across the way, just as easily.
Remotely, yeah. I'm going to use that as a great way to end this.
It's great.
This thing. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you to Jeff. Thank you to Dave and Christopher and Perry for helping put this on. The information was really good. I know that some of us want it to be like written down. This is what we're going to do. I would love that, because I need to get back to work, as we all do. And I know that's not going to happen. And at least in New York, it's not going to happen for a long time. So I really appreciate everybody here helping and doing what we do well as a community, which is pull it all together. I started a little late, because that's the other thing we all have to do, is learn new skills, like recording Zoom things. I started a little late, but what I did record, I will post on WheresSpot. And if you want to share it with any of your compatriots, etc., I think it's worthwhile. So thank you all. And hopefully we'll do another one of these pretty soon.
It's pretty good.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Perry and Michael.
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Michael.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Stay sane.
Thanks, guys.